Vedas, as I said, so you have Vedas, Rig, Yajur, Sama, Atharvana Vedas described as the Sadagamas. Okay? Vedas are on a separate pedestal compared to Mahabharata, Moola Ramayana, Pancharatragamas and Puranas. Why? Because they are unauthored. They are considered to be Apaurusheya. So Apaurusheyattvat Vedasya. So they are uncomposed. No human being, no divine being has actually composed the Vedas. This is the core understanding of Vedic philosophy. This is the core foundation of the Hindu philosophy. Is we base our philosophy and our knowledge based on the Vedas, which we consider are unauthored. Sutra of Badarayana says, Navilakshanatvadasya tatatvancha shabdat, and he goes on to describe that. Now, we will talk about why it is Apaurusheya in a different platform, but I just want you to hold on to that concept. People are the Shruti, for example, will say, you know, what is the real meaning of Veda? It says, Na indriyani, na anumanam, Vedahi eva enam tasma vedayanti tasmad ahuhu vedaha. It is called Veda, not because Veda, we all know Veda comes from the root word called Vid. Vid means to know. So even if I take my phone, I can know something, but that does not become the Veda. The Veda's definition is given by Pipala the Rishi. He says, Na indriyani, which means through perception, I cannot get the knowledge. Na anumanam, by inference, I cannot get that knowledge. Okay. Vedahi enam vedayanti. So it is through the scripture that I can know. That is why it is called Veda. Okay. Taittiriya Brahmanam also will say, Na avedavin manutetam bruhantam sarva anubhum atmanam samparaya, which means he who does not know the Vedas will not know the Supreme Being. Or he who does not know the scriptures that are derived from the Vedas will not have a knowledge of the Supreme Being and will never reach liberation, is the declaration of the Rishi of the Taittiriya Brahmana. So the three reasons why Vedas are considered so important for the Hindus is because of the three reasons. One is Apaurusheya, which means it's unauthored. So there is no defects of a writer. We all know what defects we have when we write a paper, for example. Nityatva, it is eternal. And there is something called Swataha Pramanya, which is self-valid. So these are the three pillars on which the validity of the Vedas rest. But we also know that the Vedas are infinite. Although Veda Vyasa has compiled them before, Vedas by definition are infinite. So does that mean I have to spend my whole bloody life reading this or multiple lives and I'll still not be able to read the Vedas? So Garuda Purana gives us a bit of a caution and gives us a bit of a solace here. It says, Natat idrum hitagnyayam navachyam nacha tarkyate Pashyanto api na pashyanti mero rupam vipashtitaha. It's a beautiful analogy there. He says, of course, you can't know it by your senses, you can't know it by tarka, but you can know him through the Vedas as per your capacity. And how will that be? It's like Pashyanto api na pashyanti mero rupam vipashtitaha. Some of us have gone to the Himalayas. Some of us have been to various Badris and other trips. I know Sudarshan has been all the way up to the bottom of Everest. So we've all been there. Has anybody hugged the Everest mountain? Has anybody hugged the Himalayan mountains? No. We go there, we touch it, and then we feel that we have known the mountain. So similarly, we use our capacity, use the Vedas and know something about the Supreme and feel that we have known him. We cannot know him fully, but we can know him as per our capacity. That is the caution from Garuda Purana. So now moving on to the next slide. So that is about the Vedas. Now what about Itihasa Puranam, Panchamo Vedanam, Vedaha? So we all know that Itihasas and Puranas are now called Panchamo Veda. They are also called the fifth Vedas. They are also very authentic. Why? Now Pramana Lakshanam describes Nirdoshaha Shabdaha Agama. So which means a scripture is valid as long as it has no defects. That makes sense. That is simple. So Tattva Prakashik of Jayatirtha gives further clarification. It says, Vakya Pramanyam Tavat Nirdoshataya Sambhavati. Nirdoshatacha Apaurusheyataya Optimulataya. So it describes, if a scripture is authentic, it can be authentic only based on two criteria. One, either it is unauthored like the Vedas, or it is authored by somebody who is authentic, who is a valid person. So Optimulataya means, Opti means somebody who is a valid person who has written that scripture. So those are the two criteria when we decide a piece of work or any writing is valid or not. So then there are further descriptions. Who is that Apti? The Apti, actually, there are three criteria. So for Apti Mula, you need to have Vaktru, Shrotru, and Prasanga. What that does mean? Vaktru means he who is speaking or he who is writing should be valid. Shrotru means he who hears should be valid. Prasanga means the conducive environment or the atmosphere in which this discussion happens should also be valid. Okay? Those are the three essential criteria for any aptatva, with Vaktru aptatva being the highermost. That is, the person who says should be valid. So now if you take Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavad Gita is such a big deal for us. Who spoke the Bhagavad Gita? Krishna, who is Lord himself. Who did he speak to and who listened to Krishna? Arjuna, who is Indra himself, who is such an exalted being. So this is a conversation between Krishna and Indra, where in the context of a battle, where there is this major issue as to fight or not to fight, to go towards dharma or to go towards adharma. So that discussion, that environment is conducive and the speaker is authentic and the listener is authentic. So we Hindus give great importance to Gita. Now what about Brahma Sutras? As I said, this is the dictionary for the Vedas. So Brahma Sutras composed by Veda Vyasa, who is Narayana's incarnation himself. So Narayana, so how does it happen? I'll tell you in the next slide. But basically Narayana taught this Chaturmukha Brahma, Rudra, Indra, Yama, on. That is how the Vedanta Sutra also came into being. So there, Narayana, who is the most authentic person, he is talking to the most eligible listeners. Again, that also becomes very, very conducive. The conducive atmosphere, I'll tell you in the next slide. So again, Brahma Sutras are also important for us. Okay, so now that gives you an idea as to why we are currently in modern day life, why we give so much importance to Gitas and why we give importance to Brahma Sutras and why we are giving importance to Upanishads, because Upanishads form part of the Vedas, which is Apaurusheya. So these are authentic texts. Now the other slide, moving on to the last two slides, Abhijit. So the next slide basically is to inform you that Veda Vyasa is incarnation of Narayana. So there are lots of confusions that is around. Somebody talks Maharishi Veda Vyasa. When they say Maharishi Veda Vyasa, I feel very sad when they say that, because there is endless scriptural evidence to say that Veda Vyasa is incarnation of Lord Narayana himself. The evidence is, I forgot to put the evidence for that big verse I put. It's basically Skanda Purana, which basically gives you a situation where Narayana takes incarnation as Veda Vyasa. It says Narayana Vinishpannam Jnanam Krita Yuge Sitam, and it goes on and it says Satyavati and Parashara Muni, and then Narayana took incarnation because Brahma, Rudra and Sesha go to Narayana and say, look, the world is completely lost at the end of the Dwapara Yuga. Nobody knows what's happening. Vedas are lost. Please, can you do something? So at that time, Chaturmukha Narayana takes incarnation in Satyavati and Parashara, and then he compiles the Vedas, he writes the Puranas, and then he writes Mahabharata, then he writes the Vedanta Sutra and so on. So that is how it comes along. Even in Gita 10:37, it says, Muninam api aham vyasaha. Clearly he says that in 10:37. If you go to 15:5, if you look at the last line, Vedaishta sarve rahameva vedyaha, Vedanta krit veda videvechaham. Vedanta krit. Vedanta means Vedanta Sutras. Krit is written it. I am the written the Vedanta krit. And then he says, Veda vidyevecha aham. I only know all the Vedas, and I am the one who has written Vedanta krit. It's very clear there in this. So if Veda Vyasa is incarnation of Narayana, then Narayana has written Mahabharata and Gita and the Vedanta Sutra. No wonder it is a key text for our reading. Now you may ask, how can you prove that Narayana is the highest? I'm going to say it's somebody else who is the highest. There is enough Vedas, evidence from the Vedas to actually prove this. Yes, Sarvajnaha Sarvavid. So for example, if you take Mundaka Upanishad, yes, Sarvajnaha Sarvavid, Jnanamayam Tapaha, and it goes on. Taittiriya Upanishad, again it says Brahma Vidapnoti Param, as I said, and the Sahasra Shirisha Purusha, they're all evidence to say that this Purusha Narayana is the highest person. He is Sarvajnaha Sarvavid. And that is the reason why you have this concept called the Prasthana Trayas. Shankara, Ramanuja, and Madhva have based their philosophy based on this foundation of Prasthana Trayas: Brahma Sutra Prasthana, Upanishad Prasthana, and Gita Prasthana. So they've all taken these three as foundations to come up with their philosophies, largely because these three texts are authentic, because either they are Apaurushaya, like the Upanishad Prasthana, or they have been composed by Lord Narayana in his incarnation as Veda Vyasa, as Brahma Sutra or Bhagavad Gita, which is part of the Mahabharata. So all the three great philosophers of India have used these three texts to come up with their philosophy. So again, we need to understand this. Now, Upanishad Prasthana, there I put 108 and I've scaled you, but all the three philosophers have used 10 Upanishads, by and large 10 Upanishads to come up with their philosophies.
HinduKnowledgeAcademy.com will celebrate Vedic culture and present its philosophies to the modern Hindu in an accessible format. Our ancient heritage is our greatest strength. Through preservation and dissemination, together let us spread positivity in the world. Thank you for listening and welcome to Hindu Knowledge Academy.